Around 10 years ago, I received a phone call which changed the course of my life. And at the end of that phone call, I moved to Belgium with my family. I started a new job in the European Commission to develop EU rights for victims. And I have to admit, I hadn't really thought about this issue before. My career had been focused on catching criminals, not on helping their victims. And in the last 10 years, I've met and seen the tragedies which people face every day, millions of people face every year. And I've also discovered how the responses that we as individuals and as societies have can be as damaging to victims as the crime itself, but which can also be integral to their survival and to their healing. And I've met truly inspiring people who've suffered the worst of crimes and have overcome those crimes, have risen above those crimes and transformed their lives. And I've discovered that victims, above all else, they need to be heard and they need to be recognised and they need to know they're not alone. And I've seen that the actions that we take, every one of us, can make a difference, however small that action is. So 30 years ago, 13 organisations came together to form Victim Support Europe. And in that same year, in 1990, they also declared the 22nd of February to be European Day for Victims of Crime. And their vision for Europe was one where every person stood together to help victims of crime and to fight for their rights and to ensure that they had the same services no matter where in Europe they were, no matter what the crime. So the 22nd of February is a day where we can remember all of those who have lost their lives to crime, but also stand in unison for those who have been affected, recognise their suffering, celebrate the strength and courage of survivors, and stand together for those who continue to suffer. In the last 30 years, we've seen a lot of progress in this area, and that is thanks to the efforts of thousands of people from across the world, people and organisations from all walks of life, from all backgrounds and professions, whether these are police officers, judges, prosecutors, support workers, medical staff, companies and entrepreneurs, singers, actors. They've all come together as family members, friends, colleagues, working to help those that they don't know and those that they do know, with that common thread which is the victimisation. And they've come together irrespective of the type of crime. They have supported and advocated for victims of sexual violence, of domestic violence, of murder, of theft and fraud, for any of the many millions of victims who suffer crime, and not just for the different kinds of crimes, but also across all sorts of sectors. And they've worked for men, women, children, the young or the old who have suffered crime, for different communities, whether those are minorities, from ethnic communities, religious communities, the LGBTI community, whether they are people with disabilities or many others. They've come together and joined with this single voice, with this single vision to help any victim of crime, no matter where they are. And together they have formed and realised a slow but unstoppable progress in the field, so that today we see a significant improvement, even if there's still much to be done. There has been a lot of progress, but as I said, there are still many challenges. Millions of people face terrible hardship every year because of the crime, because of the failures of our systems, and because of the responses of individuals and societies. Victim Support Europe has carried out research under the Vociari project, which has shown that one of the major challenges that victims face today is not the rights which are already in place across Europe, but the gap between those rights and the realities that they actually face. Simply put, those laws have not been put into practice. And what we see is that there are thousands of people who never come forward, who are not unknown and remain silent. They never report the crime, they can never access support, and they can never get the justice that they deserve. And we also know, despite how essential support services are, that they don't exist in a uniform and consistent and sufficient manner across the whole of Europe. Not only is support not sufficiently accessible, but information which is critical to accessing their services and to accessing rights is not available, is not provided, or is not provided in a way which is understandable to the victims that receive it. And within our justice and law enforcement systems and across wider society, victims face bias, they face blaming, they face prejudice, and they lack the protection that they need to be able to come forward and to be able to safely participate in a justice system and in our wider societies. And finally, despite the fact that they have a right to compensation, many victims never receive that compensation, or they go through such hardship when trying to access the compensation that they simply drop out. So we continue to face a whole series of challenges despite the progress, and much more needs to be done. Let us start this new decade by seizing the initiative and making it a decade for change, a decade for action for victims of crime. Every one of us has the responsibility and the power to make a difference. Every one of us can support victims by learning about the issues, by changing our attitudes at home, in the workplace, online and beyond. No matter what action you take, your voice matters. No matter what action you take, you can make a difference. Whether that's a donation, a like, whether it's personal action by volunteering for a charity, creating your own NGO, or including victims' issues in your company. No matter what it is, you can make a difference. The answer and solutions lie with us. So on the 30th anniversary for the European Day for Victims of Crime, I encourage all of you to add your voice to the cause. I encourage all of you to take action today to make a difference to people's lives.